So, and that's about the time where I came across RPR and BeActivated, is after that first shoulder surgery. And it actually allowed me to push about 2 years before I got another shoulder surgery. All right, I was able to work through, keep my body in a better position to still compete before I had that second shoulder surgery. So it was a year and a half exactly from when I injured my shoulder to where I actually ended up having the surgery. So the methods, like I tell everyone, if you don't need surgery, we can probably get some progress with our methods.
Welcome to the Against the Herd podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Coach Mark Rodgers. Coach Rodgers has a degree in kinesiology, was a powerlifter for many years, and runs a practice where he practices the BeActivated practice founded by Doug Heel, which focuses on trigger points throughout the body and releasing tension and ensuring that people are able to have the highest levels of athletic performance possible, whether they are an athlete or a layperson. So tons of good information in here about keeping your body in check and how to know when you're locked up in certain areas of your body. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome back to Against the Herd, where we explore unconventional approaches for unconventional results, and it's by interviewing unconventional people. And today's guest is none other than Mr. Mark Rodgers. Coach Rodgers, how the hell are we?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. No, I mean, you've been, as I've said before, you are certainly you are the shaman, and you're doing something that is, I don't know if this is going to do it justice. It's like a mix of massage, chiropractic work, as well as just a foam rolling effect. And all of that just comes into one to where I walk out and I have to see you and visit you every single month. So let's jump into exactly what that is. And it's called BeActivated. Tell us, what is BeActivated?
So a little bit of backstory real quick. BeActivated was created by a surfer in Cape Town, South Africa. His name's Douglas Hill. So I like to say, if there was a shaman in this thing, then Douglas would probably be the guy that we'd refer to. Amazing talent. He was a physio. He likes to call himself a surfer. That's a physio over there in South Africa. Amazing mind. Very good intuition. And obviously he brought, he created something that's helping people get out of pain and move better. With BeActivated, he reached out to a group in America, and they created a system called RPR, which is Reflexive Performance Reset. Those guys have helped spread the word that way, and that's how I initially got involved. BeActivated it's a tool for stress management. Okay, it's a tool for stress management, getting our body in a relaxed state. Or what we'd like to prefer as the performance state. Right, so get our body out of the stress state so we can perform at higher levels and move with better patterns.
Okay. And so thank you for that, because that's an excellent way of putting it. And that term, you use that numerous times with me as well. And so the one thing I could say about you and our visits is you have a mind for the body. It's almost, it's like you just, not only, I think that this protocol allows you to see, and I think BeActivated allows you to understand what needs to be reset. But I think you just naturally have a gift for understanding the body in general. Where did that come from? How did you get here today?
I mean, so I graduated 2003 with a degree in kinesiology, was in coaching, exercise performance, and right around 2010, started my own personal training facility. And at that same time, being a former collegiate athlete, I needed to find something that I could continue to compete in, and I chose powerlifting. So probably one of the most strenuous sports that there is. And throughout that throughout trying to be a really good power lifter, obviously we push our bodies to the extreme limits, right? And we have to find better ways to recover and take care of ourselves. And I was always searching for something, always trying to make sure, you know, minimize the injuries. How can I put more pounds on the bar? And ironically, I've had really good mentors throughout the years. One of those guys was Donnie Thompson. He created the body tempering uh, craze that we have going on, which is another tool in the toolbox that we use. And like I said, BeActivated is a really cool system and series, and that's one of the things that I base, or the foundation of what I base my practice on. But I like to go to the toolbox to make sure I can pull out anything to fit the needs of each client, because every client doesn't fit one system. Everybody has their own specific needs, which is like you said, you've had, the foam rolling effects. We've had, some like trigger point type stuff happening. And so started back in like 2013, 14, looking up Donnie Thompson and his protocols on body tempering, getting the best out of the muscles. Had a shoulder surgery in 2014. Wasn't too happy about, but what do we do when we recover, right? We get back on the platform, or if we're a competitor in whatever sport it is, we want to make sure we try to get back to that level as long as we can, uh, because that's what competitors do. We want to compete in something. And that's about the time where I came across RPR and BeActivated, is after that first shoulder surgery. And it actually allowed me to push about 2 years before I got another shoulder surgery. All right, I was able to work through, keep my body in a better position to still compete before I had that second shoulder surgery. So it was a year and a half exactly from when I injured my shoulder to where I actually ended up having the surgery. So the methods, like I tell everyone, if you don't need surgery, we can probably get some progress with our methods.
Fantastic. And you had mentioned before that BeActivated is a great way to release your body from a state of stress. What did you mean by? Could you go a bit further into that? Like stress in terms of mental stress. I'm really busy with my daily life and I'm just tense from that. Is that more muscular stress? These muscles are under stress and need to be relaxed. What did you mean by that?
So our body really doesn't differentiate between physical and emotional, other types of stress, right? It just says I'm under stress. So sometimes you have negative thoughts, the body starts to feel those emotions, and things start to tighten up or shut down. Right? Usually it starts with your breath and the diaphragm. Uh, it could be physical stress. It could be trauma from an injury. It could be just high stress from overworking or pushing yourself, overreaching in the gym, maybe. Or it could be an accident you had in your car where nothing physically happened, but you were shaken up pretty good. Um, the goal is to be able to help the individual find out what is causing, uh, where they're locked up at, and get them out of that position. Hope I
Got it.
answered
And
your
is that
question.
something that people can do themselves, or would most see a practitioner in order to have these techniques
Yeah, so that's
performed?
a really cool thing about BeActivated and RPR. RPR specifically was kind of designed for people to actually do the stuff on themselves. Just like everyone comes into a session with me, I want to give them tools to help them navigate through their own body and find ways to maybe help release the diaphragm, or activate the psoas, or activate the glutes to make sure that they can do the basic things to help their body function. It all starts with the breath. It all starts with the breath, and by people being able to learn how to control their breath and find good deep belly breaths, uh, allows them to contract and retract the diaphragm the way that's supposed to be, which takes the stress off your internal organs as well.
That's I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I wanted to really dig into. The one thing that you've stressed to me, especially under my intent, like my amount of stress, is belly breathing, belly breathing. And when you can tell, I don't know how we can do a visual of what this is, but it feels like when you know that I'm tense, you are basically just dragging your fingers. You know that just by dragging it across the ribs. Um, with belly breathing, how are you coaching? how are you coaching your clients of the importance of that and implementing that? And what's like a good protocol for them to just like get back to that because we often forget about it?
Yeah, so usually the homework that I give after an intro session with a client is super simple. When you first wake up in the morning, put your hand on your belly, take 10 deep belly breaths. Right. At night before you go to bed, take 10 deep belly breaths. Okay? And anytime during the day where you feel like you want to cuss someone out, take a few deep belly breaths. Right. Because what happens is the diaphragm locks up. And most people has had some case of anxiety to where you feel your breath really shorten. What happens? The diaphragm locks up right there and it doesn't allow the lungs to fully expand. So the oxygen and the energy is bouncing from the diaphragm to the throat. Right. That's where you get the little palpitations in the chest. Um, the one thing that we can control as a human being is our own breathing. That's the one thing that we have control of. So we can get ourselves out of those situations. Sometimes we just don't elect to do that, right? Or sometimes we don't have the education to do that. And that's one of the things that I like to bring to my clients is make sure, hey, if all else fails, find your belly, right? It sounds silly, but find your belly. Take a few deep breaths and see what happens. Yeah.
I love that. And I feel like the breath is number one. I agree with that. But then two, I feel like what's always missing is the psoas, and people neglect that and they don't even realize that that's going there. Can you stress the importance of the psoas and stress to people how important it is to focus on that?
So, fun fact, one of the only muscles, if not the only muscle, to connect the lower part of the body to the upper part of the body, right? So it connects down at the femur, the forehead, and it goes all the way up into right behind your diaphragm in the diaphragm area. That's why the psoas is so important because when the diaphragm locks up, it pulls on the psoas tightens up, then now our hip flexion isn't working. So our body's ability to breathe and move are that's the most vital, right? We have to be able to breathe, we have to be able to move. And when the psoas gets locked up, it pulls on the diaphragm and makes our breathing more shallow. Then it also changes our movement patterns. Right? And if our psoas isn't doing its job, then something else is going to do its job for it because our body doesn't just sit there when you're trying to take steps forward. Just you're standing up and you're trying to go to the kitchen and your psoas isn't working like it's supposed to. Your brain just doesn't say, "Okay, we're not going." Right? We're pretty magnetic human beings, and we're designed pretty awesome, and our brain finds a way to make that work. Right? Which is where the compensation patterns come in. And those compensation patterns can be light for some people, it can be strong for others. And when they get really strong, that's where people usually experience pain and then obviously potential injury.
So, compensation patterns, what do you think with your clients? And I don't know what percentage are desk workers, but what are you typically seeing out of those particular industries?
I mean, so what I see is psoas is inability to stay active, right? And I like to refer to the body as kind of like a breaker box, right? The brain and the breaker box. Just because the lights in the ceiling aren't turning on when you flip the switch doesn't mean the lights are bad, right? But sometimes that trigger flips the breaker box to where the lights turn off. Same thing with your psoas sitting long periods of time, and then underuse or undertraining those. Right? We do a lot of training with, let's do some leg presses and leg extensions and make our quads look really cool in the mirror. But how many people are doing stuff for their hip flexors? So not only do you sit a lot, which puts them in a short position to where they don't want to jump up and start working when you stand up out of your chair immediately, but they're also underutilized. So they're undertrained. So when you do expect them to take on a load and you're training at a high level, they're not going to be available as long as you like them. So the thing that I see is low back pain uh, specifically, and then people's inability to engage their lats. Right? And that inability usually come from shoulders, chest, living in front of us with our smartphones all day long. Right? Everything we do is in front of us. We're hunched over. We don't work on our posture enough. And what happens is the more we're forward, the less activation of the lats, which causes usually shoulder problems.
Interesting.
or
And could you
or maybe
comment?
shoulder issues. No problem.
Of course, and again, as people who I move around a decent bit, but as people who are both, more or less desk workers, as a lot of folks out there are, is there anything posture-wise you would recommend as somebody goes throughout their workday? I like using a standing desk. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on, positions people can sit in or standing desks versus not. That there's a million gimmicks out there. Just curious if you have experience or would recommend any.
So there is one item that I really like, and it's Donnie Thompson's bow tie. I think he has it on spudinc.com. Might be on his website as well, but it's called a bow tie. It's a thing that goes around the shoulders. It was designed for lifters. It was designed for lifters with poor posture to help reinforce those positions. I like that product a lot. The only thing I say is like moderation in everything. You know, standing desks sound really cool, but if you stand just as much as you sit, eventually something else is going to get tired. I have a lot of people say, well, I stand all day on my feet and their back hurts, right? So what happens in those situations? Well, the glutes get tired, the glutes get sleepy. Now the low back is taking over and doing that extension, right? But it has to do with the stress of what you're doing. You can be standing, sitting, doesn't matter. If you have a super stressful job, the stress is going to resonate within your body, and that's going to take over anyway. If that makes sense, that's going to lock you up itself. If you have a great job that you love and you enjoy everything throughout the day, a lot of times it's just your attitude and your approach in life. If you're doing things at a positive level, your body's not going to be shut down and stressed out.
So I'd like to give, I don't know how we give a visual, but what are typically, you see a client, I'm a first time client, I've heard about you. What are a couple things, a couple tests just to give you an idea or to help you guide on exactly what they need?
So easily when we put them on the table, there's a couple of demonstrations or assessments that we'll do. Uh, Generally, I look at how the person breathes. Can they breathe do they naturally breathe in their belly, or does their chest fill up? 90% of the time, when someone lays on the table, I tell them take 3 deep breaths, the chest rises up, right? I know they're stressed already. And then at that point, I go into testing the psoas and then obviously the glutes, because those guys kind of work hand in hand together. Uh, those are the three main important things. Once we test those things, everything else kind of will either fall in line or not fall in line, for lack of better words. Um, and sometimes they'll fail the psoas test, but their quads are working fine. Well, of course, the quads are working fine because they've been compensating by using their quads for hip flexion instead of their psoas. The real issues is when the psoas isn't working, and then the quads isn't working, and then nothing else is helping the psoas work. Now you're getting to a point where uh, you're probably going to injure something if you're performing at a high level.
Coach, I didn't want you to tell everybody my problems, all right? You just described exactly my No, so there are three things that I do. There are three resets that you have that when you can get through it, it's wonderful. It's great on the other side. All right, so I'm going to go through. Nick, you don't know about this, but talk to me about first running those big ass knuckles down the center of the chest and the importance of that.
So that's just part of the breathing circuit, right? That's number one. We call it the upside down Y. So we're trying to stimulate the tissue of the sternum right before we go into the rib tissue right underneath. A lot of times when people's had some emotional trauma, that is extremely sensitive area because in their heart center, you're holding a lot of energy. And back in the day, I don't know if they still do it or not, but a lot of first responders, that was one of the things that they would do to get people to respond and wake up. Like when they got to a scene and someone's passed out, they'll start them up.
All right, now to the next one. You made it seem so nice. Now, right behind the ear. Now, this one's it's one that is just you forget that that spot's even there. But like I said, I mean, it's tough up front, but then afterwards, it's like this it was like this complete weight off your chest. Explain to me exactly like what's going on and the purpose of that
Well, so
reset.
that's actually a trigger point for the glute circuit. The base of the head and right behind the ear there. And people ask all the time, it's like, well, how does that connect to my glutes? Well, if you think about it, your brain's sitting up here, right? How do all the nerves get all down to my toes? Like, how do we control those things? So we're stimulating around the trigger points that are connected to different areas of the body. And generally, the most tender spots that people have, that means the more tender it is, that's usually a sign of dysfunction somewhere in that area. Right. So if your glutes are firing pretty good, but maybe not really good, it might be a little tender. But if you're completely shut down and it's not working at all, you might want to jump off the table once we stick our finger or thumb in
Yes, yes, no, know that well. Um, Last one, number 3, the jaw reset. Now that this one's dealer's choice. It's a real treat. Walk us through that one.
So the jaw reset, I actually experienced it the first time when I went on a trip to London and met with one of Douglas's associates up there, and uh, she was having a hard time getting me out of my patterns. I was locked up, long flight over to London. Not only was I locked up from training and the stuff that I was doing, but the flight kind of threw me over the edge. And that's where she introduced, the resets with inside the mouth, the palate reset. And what it boils down to is my jaw is one of my compensation patterns. Right? So clenching my jaw through whether it be physical stress or emotional stress, that is one of my patterns. And what I was holding all that energy in there and not allowing it to get to where it needed to be. And what's really cool about this stuff is the fact that everyone is different. Everyone's body tells a different story. And I think Douglas would agree, and I've seen it in his literature. Is like he created the system, but he's not a systems guy because he knows that everybody's different. The system's just kind of like a foundation for people to go on to get through a session. But at the end of the day, not every person needs every single thing, right? And what interrupts your patterns may be different than what interrupts someone else's patterns.
No, that's right. And I believe, like for instance, just even going through some of these questions, right? For me to paint the brush on those 3, right? They're my 3 because well, I have a very stressful job, and so I carry on a lot of that stress, and so that's what hits me. But like for instance, Bree, my wife, right? That wasn't the same. It wasn't the same case for her. So I agree with you 100% there. I guess a question for me is why how come this isn't as mainstream as like the chiropractic work and like getting a massage? Like I because again, this because I come to you every single month, and I walk out of there and I'm exactly what you said, like I'm reset. Why do you think that this isn't mainstream?
Because it works. You can't make a lot of money off of something that works. It's not a
Th-
drug. It's not a pill that they can keep prescribing over and over. It's not an $80,000 surgery that they can put you on a table and try to fix something. I mean, you'd be surprised at the amount of people I've kept from going under the knife just by a simple reset. And I know fellow practitioners around the country and especially in South Africa and London, where Douglas has his biggest footprints, it's the same thing. I had a client literally today, right? Definite jaw cheat, but I told her she couldn't get the full jaw reset on her first session. However, she says she's been in pain for a decade, you know, and I told her before she came in the room, I said, there's a good chance you're going to cry today. All right. And before halfway through the session was over, guess what? She's bawling. Why? Because she's been in pain for almost 10 years. she hasn't been able to walk without pain, and now she walked out pain free. That's the type of changes that myself and our fellow practitioners are making. And all we can do is just keep trying to push the education, keep trying to instill the simple things in our young athletes who are pushing their bodies to the limit, give them the tools, the self resets that they can do on their own. And then at the end of the day, it's really hard to combat somebody who has a medical degree that was in college for 12 years that wants to put you on a table and make $100,000, but it works.
Very, very true. And how would somebody find a fellow practitioner? Obviously, if they're in the Austin area, they could find you. But where would somebody to go to look something like that up?
Yeah, so I think there's a link on Douglas Hill's website, douglashill.com, that has practitioners on it. The other resources that I've seen, there's a couple of Facebook groups. RPR, Reflexive Performance Resets, they have a Facebook group where people go and find practitioners, as well as I know Douglas, the BeActivated group. They also, I see a lot of messages come through there, people looking for practitioners in certain areas. Most of his is London and South Africa based. So we're kind of hard to find right now.
Yeah.
I know there's a handful of people that's done some training in the Austin area. I'm not sure how many people like actively practice it on a regular basis.
One thing too, I think it's important to note too, right? With your, you talk about athletes and you're doing a lot of really interesting stuff, both in your coaching, as well as I think you have a pretty solid athlete. I think on the Olympic side, is that right?
Yeah, so Lizzie Smith, she's a Paralympian swimmer, silver medalist in Tokyo, and she's actually getting ready for Worlds in Manchester coming up here at the end of July.
And important to note that she drags you everywhere, wherever she's going and wherever she's competing. You're typically coming along for this reason, because it works and you create peak performance. You facilitate peak performance through
Yeah,
your resets.
I like the word facilitate a little bit better. I'm just there. Everybody else is going to respond differently, and how you respond and the success we have together depends on you allowing me to do the things that I do, and you actually releasing and letting your body do the things that it's designed to do, which is breathe and move. She's a fantastic athlete, not just a swimmer. She's a fantastic athlete, and it's been a really fun challenge. It's very enjoyable. She's has a limb. I don't like to say the word disability because we don't use the word disability, but she's missing half of her left arm, right? And that itself creates new patterns that most people wouldn't be creating. And for us to be able to get the success that we have together, she's really opened up and really, bought into the system. She trains her ass off. We make sure she stays ready, and the results speak for itself.
No, they definitely do. Nick, anything else that you would add to this? This has been phenomenal. This is exactly what I wanted to get out of this interview. Nick?
No, I very much appreciate it. Maybe if you had any like tips for the audience, a self-release technique that you find most useful to folks. I know we've already gone over how different this is for everybody, and I completely understand that. But maybe a simple thing that they are very capable of doing themselves that they may not be thinking of right now. Do we have any quick tips like that?
So what I like to do with my athletes is have them standing and put their hands toward the bottom of their rib cage. Just have them take 10 deep breaths into their hands. That allows them to make sure that their diaphragm is expanding the right way. The other thing is, maybe laying something on top of your belly and try to push it to the ceiling when you're taking your breaths if you're lying down and doing it. The cool thing is that little spot behind your ear, between your jaw and your ear, that'll help activate the glutes really quickly. Um, you can also do a couple of tests. I know one of the tests that I think it was Douglas had us do on one of his courses during the COVID on a couple of virtual sessions. Take like 5 or 10 deep breaths in your chest, and then bend over and touch your toes and see what it feels like, and then reverse it, and then take five to 10 breaths in your belly, and repeat the same thing. You'll feel the difference in release. Right? Because when
I
you're
love
breathing in the
that.
chest, we're stressing our diaphragm, right?
I love that. And then, all right, speed round. I'm trying to do this at the end of every session. All right, so right or hip hook? Which one are you going for to relieve the psoas?
Oh man, so I haven't, I have no experience with a hip hook. Uh, I have tried the so right. It it can get in there pretty good. My personal favorite is the Theragun. Hit that hit that right angle between the hip bone and the belly button, and crank that baby up, and let it go. Let it stimulate in there. And usually
Interesting.
and usually your body will let you find that tender spot that really needs it.
I think I know the answer to this next one, but I was going to be, all right, massage gun or foam roller.
Definitely massage gun. What I don't like about the foam roller is when you're on top of the foam roller, your body's natural tendency when you come across a sensitive spot is to raise up off of it, right? So what if you're rolling your quad and you hit a knot on the outside part of your quad as you're using your arms, what does the rest of your body do? You tense
Get
up,
the hell
right?
off it. Right.
Yeah, you get up and you tense up. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do. And that's one of the reasons I like Donnie Thompson's work with the body tempering a lot, is because the tempering allows you to relax while someone's actually mashing you out with these big ass rollers, right? And so you don't have a choice but to let things go. Whereas if you're doing things by yourself, you're going to come off that knot pretty quick. And instead of getting a release, you're still tight.
So I love that, and I love this interview. I think it's incredibly important. I think what you're doing, it's changed my life. I think it's changing all of your athletes, um, and what you're doing in our little pocket of Austin. Where can you know? What are you doing on social, and like where can people find you? Um, because I mean you're doing the gold that you're giving to us. um, I hope that it somehow makes it onto social. But if nothing else, like this is definitely going to make it to social. So how can people find you?
I mean, Instagram is probably the most reliable. I really hate Facebook. I really hate social media, just to be honest. I like to spend my time and energy and the work that I do and the people around me. So, Mr. SAFATX is the Instagram handle. And like I said before, I'm not the only person out there that's doing this great type of work. We have the RPR guys, and their resources be activated around the world, and hopefully people, you're able to track down somebody in your area, that can give you these experiences. I know it changed my life, from going from a broke down power lifter to actually feeling good, and perform. I've been performing at a high level for even since COVID. After second shoulder surgery, hitting numbers in the gym that I didn't hit before I had those surgeries. Um, and it really hasn't been that hard, and we're talking about surgeries that happened 8, 6 years ago. That's a lot of time on someone that's performing at a high level, because the older you get, the harder it gets to recover. And I think that's one of the missing things. People talk about this stuff and how it helps them perform at a high level. It also helps you recover at a higher level, because the purpose of training is, one, to enjoy it, but two, to stress the body in a way for it to adapt, right? But once we get through stressing it, what do we need to do? We got to get out of that stress state. So this system also helps you recover from the training a little bit faster as well.
I feel like I'm going to keep having some questions because more pops up. How
I
often do
don't have a
you
time limit.
recommend? How how often, so they're able to get a practitioner. How are you typically giving, what's the dosage for for BeActivated?
So a reset can last anywhere from 24 hours to 5 years. I've had people come in that has just had these chronic issues or get them fixed up, and I never see them again, and that's perfectly okay. I'm okay with that actually. Like I enjoy having clients and having people come through the doors on a regular basis. It has to do with your breaker box's ability to adapt, right? How fast is that breaker switch going to pop? And if you're a high performance athlete and you're pushing your RPMs at a super high level on a regular basis, you're training once or twice a day, 5 to 6 days a week, there's a good chance that you're going to blow a fuse, for lack of better terms, right? Something's going to not work because athletes, our bodies are smart and stupid at the same time because we train through fatigue, we train through pain because we want to win, right? So our bodies find those compensation patterns to keep pushing. So the goal is, and what I do with most of my athletes, at least once or twice a week, to get them on the table and just do a quick check-in. It doesn't have to be a full reset. Just do a quick check-in, make sure things are locking in and working like they're supposed to, uh, and then we get to training. If you don't have a super active lifestyle, then your breaker box isn't going to be pushed as hard. You're not going to have all those amps running to it at one time.
Mm.
Right? So it really depends on the individual. How hard is their training, or how hard is their lifestyle? I had a client. It's a pretty good story. Um, she came in for a reset. It was like a Saturday. She's feeling great. It was Monday or Tuesday, and she texted me. She's like, "I need to get in now." She's like, "My body is shut down." Well, what had happened was there was an incident in their neighborhood, and someone who approached her at her garage at her house basically scared the shit out of her, right? She went into the flight mode, right? So she shut down completely. So all her systems, that tripped her breaker box. And we just did a reset like 2 days ago, right? So it's literally what stressors come in and take over and send all those amps to the breaker box to make it blow a fuse. So it really depends on the individual, their lifestyle and situations. That was a weird situation, just randomly happened, but I mean, shoot, we've all been in relationships before and you had an argument, right? That get that
Yeah.
gets you that gets you stressed out and amped up. It's going to throw some
Yeah.
things out of whack.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've made a really good distinction of, it's not just, you primarily work with, or not work with, but, you coach athletes, right? And, but it's not just that, right? It's the stresses from everyday life, right? Nick and I are both in sales. It's the stresses from, it's end of quarter, end of month, and having that type of stress, locking our diaphragms, locking up, not being able to breathe correctly, not doing all of the little things right, or being mindful of the little things. And I think that all just comes full circle. And your body pays the price on that. And that's the thing where I get a ton of value from our work together is, yeah, it's also a good point of me of recognizing how much I put my body through, right? Because when I see you, you're able to quickly see, all right, this is compensating for that. You've been stressed. You're breathing through your chest. All of these things, your glutes aren't activating, and so it's a good reminder of, all right, Bruce, you're not doing the little things. Because when the times that I do come in and everything's working right, boy, I'll let you know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's probably one of the biggest gems biggest accolades. I don't know whatever you call it. When someone comes to me and they're like, they're connecting with their body on. If I can get athletes and even non-athletes alike to reconnect with their body on a high level, then they're going to live a less stressed life. What they say, stress is a silent killer, right? So if we can teach ourselves to be less stressful and perform at a higher level in all aspects of our lives, our quality of life is going to be better. And a lot of athletes don't connect with themselves, and especially nowadays, there's so much stimulation out there and so many distractions where they stay distracted with their smartphones and hell, the YouTubes and whatever else, the TikToks, whatever all these kids are doing. Like they're constantly stimulated by something externally, so they can override what's going on inside. So a lot of times they'll miss those cues. So when my athletes come in and are like, yeah, this my quad's hurting a little bit. I think my psoas is off. You know, or my ankles hurt. My calf is hurting. I feel like my strides aren't the same. Like being able to recognize those things in your own body is huge, because at a high level, and athletes are performing at a high level, there's nothing worse than being injured.
Well, I mean, and that too, you make a really good point too, right? I can't tell you how many times where I felt like my leg not getting numb, but just like, or I feel my lower back, and it's just like, nope, I got to finish this email. I got to finish this. It's like, not listening to your body. So I think it's a really, really important distinction. Um, Mark, I can't thank you. I can't thank you enough. I can't think of a better way for us to wrap this up. We know how to get you in social media or on social media. I think I'm going to spare you the questions. I think I'm tapped out. I want to thank you, one, for taking the time, but two,
Yes.
also for being against the herd.
Hey, I love it, man. Anything to be different, but most importantly, to make sure we make a change and an impact and with the people we're working with, and save them thousands of dollars.
That's it, man. That is it.
You'd
All
be
right.
losing money not to. One of my favorite things.